Anthem has faced a lot of criticism before, during, and after its launch. Many have stated their opinions, some in anger, and some just for views. I'm not here to tell you that Anthem is perfect, because that would be a lie, and there are plenty of issues present within Anthem. In many aspects, this feels like a looter shooter that was made in a vacuum, or the industry's first attempt at trying to do something like this. On the other hand, it has other areas, like its combat, that feels damn close to perfect. Anthem is both an impressive yet flawed game, and one with a lot of potential. While there are plenty of takes of Anthem online, and many exclusively focus on the flaws, and given that there are many of them, I do understand this and how easy it can be to fall into it. And while I do want to discuss my issues with Anthem, I do want to praise it for the areas that I think it excels at and how to potentially improve it. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my review for Anthem. The controls and combat are really good. Anthem provides a great and different means to move around its environments by allowing you to fly and hover. With just the push of a button, you'll be flying. It is very accessible and very empowering. There is a bar that you'll need to monitor so that your jets won't overheat and cause you to crash. Water sources will help you to cool down, and taking some dips within the air will help you to conserve your engines. If you need to land and cool your engines, it doesn't take too long before you can get back up in the air again. There is a great sense of satisfaction to continually assessing your environments and making it so that you can continually stay in the air. It's like a mini challenge that you can do each time you're flying. I think this contributes to the enjoyment of going into the free play mode. Your means of traversal is very important for open environments. A poor means to move around, or if it's clunky, can really drag down the entire experience. Free play does allow for fun ways in how the areas do weave into each other. I do like how you'll be up in one encampment, and then if you drop down below, you'll be in a completely new area. There's a flow here, and I like it. I do think BioWare should take this flying and find a way to have a means of some type of race mode within their game. I personally would like to see a few set pieces added as well in the future to kind of have some type of Death Star trench run that's used to be able to bookend some really good sequences. I never got sick of flying, and it definitely helped to contribute to Anthem's identity as a way to be able to free the player from normally being regulated to the ground. The flight deserves recognition because of how seamless it is done. BioWare did a great job at integrating it into the game. Simple and empowering. Flight isn't just used for getting around, but it will assist you in combat. Combat is another area that feels great. Again, the controls need to be commended. Players will know when a game feels right, and I think sometimes we take that for granted. But when a game's control feels off, especially when it comes to the aiming of a gun, it can really make the experience feel awkward and distract itself from the action. Anthem doesn't have this problem. Aiming, shooting, and using your skills are all well done. You get a variety of different classes of guns to fire, and they are everything that you would expect from a shooter. The skills are a bit different depending on the type of javelin you are using. I went with the Ranger, so I had a melee ability, a grenade, and a launcher. These can be interchanged with different pieces of loot you will find. For example, I could get a flame grenade, an ice grenade, or even a grenade that would seek out my enemies. Flight comes in handy when you can quickly jump out of a situation and reposition yourself, and your dodge boost will help with dodging attacks. There isn't a cover system here, so movement is key. You can unleash your powers and weapons from above while hovering. This can be particularly useful when you're trying to hit some of the enemy's weak points. Headshots and kills are very satisfying within Anthem, and to take it a bit further, you also have combos within the combat. These can be used from your own abilities or using your abilities in tandem with a partner. Essentially, one skill will prime the enemy, and another skill will complete the combo. A nice sound will chime in to let you know that you completed a combo. You do a lot more damage with this, and it's extremely rewarding to pull them off. They require cooperation to continually do, making co-op even more rewarding. While this game is really easy to get into, you'll find yourself rethinking how you want to approach situations. This is due to how the game provides you with a means of flight. In many games, you can run away to cover, or you can jump out of the way. With Anthem, you can do all of that and also fly, and this requires you to think about situations differently since you have this ability specific to the game. The means in which you gain health also factors into this. Dead enemies will drop health kits, and if your character has a shield, it will regenerate without taking some damage. But either way, the combat actively rewards you for staying within the fight and encourages it with its systems. In many games, if you're in danger, you'll need to hide behind cover. With Anthem, you can fly out of there or take out some of the weaker enemies to get some health. Both the flight and combat are really impressive.
We live in a dangerous world. The gods who built it vanished, leaving behind their instruments that aimlessly reshaped the land. These ancient relics harness an unknowable force we call the Anthem of Creation. But the Anthem refuses to be controlled. To survive, our ancestors invented the javelins and built cities with great walls.
BioWare is a studio that has a long history of telling great stories. Many players enjoy their memorable stories, whether it's from Knights of the Old Republic, Dragon Age, or even Mass Effect, and many more. They have a long history of capturing our attention with engaging worlds and characters that we really connect with. They stay with us in the best possible way. Anthem is a bit different from a story perspective. Even though this is a BioWare game, they usually put their story first, but with Anthem being a looter shooter, there was going to be a higher focus on gameplay. Now that doesn't mean the story would be ignored, but it would be different compared to what they've done before. Many critics focus on BioWare not delivering a compelling narrative with Anthem, and having it not be on par with their prior work. I understand these statements, and I would agree that Anthem is probably BioWare's weakest story. But when compared to other modern looter shooters, I think there's much to enjoy here. Anthem is more focused on its gameplay than its story. Overall, what is present within the narrative is decent, good in spots, and enjoyable. The story is familiar in its structure and does a better job than the first entry of some of its contemporaries. For example, in Destiny, the darkness was continually discussed as being this mysterious opposing force, but even after 2 games, I can't really tell you what it is. I'm not sure the writers know what it is either. In Anthem, the Anthem is given enough context along with the rest of the world so that you feel comfortable within the new setting and you'll want to learn more. I do like how your avatar is an actual character within Anthem. This way, there's some nice back and forth in conversations rather than having NPCs continually talk at you. I do wish you could provide more personal touches to how your character reacts. It is appreciated that he or she isn't a silent protagonist though. The main story does a good job of providing an initial conflict for the player to complete. The main villain is not the focus, as the main bad guy is this opposing force with nothing really unique about him. What I do like is the conflict and development with your allies. The character you control is more of a static hero with other characters playing off of you. Without getting into spoilers, there's a nice development with one of the characters that provides a shift in the story and sets up some interesting stuff for potential future stories. The initial story lays the groundwork for a great and interesting relationship, and I hope that BioWare really executes this premise that they kind of started to dabble with in this first part. While I have more to say about the execution of the first-person cutscenes in the flaws section of my review, I did appreciate the amount of quality with them. When you are back at the fort, there are many characters to talk to. The fort acts like a streamlined BioWare game, with conversations providing you with 2 different responses to a character. These elements help to build the world and have a deeper connection to the story. I found myself getting more attached to the fort because of these conversations than say something like the tower from Destiny. This is also where you're going to get that familiar feel of a BioWare game with these conversations. The dialogue is generally good and there's some good humor here. The standout characters that you'll experience are Halleck, Faye, and Owen. The story isn't perfect and there are some issues within it. The initial conflict and story segments sets up the freelancers as underdogs trying to get back into the good graces of the people. But this underdog story is never really felt within the narrative. While I did enjoy the story, I do think the story could have benefited from having the player experience a great loss within the game, especially before the final battle. This would have helped to elevate some of the sense of stakes also within the world itself, which is something that is not felt at all when you're in the fort. It feels like the people within the fort are kind of oblivious to all of the actions that are going on outside of it. I do not want each conversation to be bleak within the fort, but showing more people having more concern about what's going on in their world would have been appreciated. If you go into the story wanting a story on par with prior BioWare games, then you're going to be disappointed. But if you want a looter shooter that has a pretty good story, you're probably going to be content with what they have to offer. Now, let's get into the flaws. While I enjoyed the story and talking to characters at the fort, I think how the story is conveyed to the player and the actual gameplay goes against each other. Anthem is best played within co-op with friends, but with the fort, it's best done when you're alone. When you and your friends return to the fort, you'll be able to go into your own individual forts and not interact with each other. You cannot participate in each other's conversations with other characters, nor explore the fort with each other. The combat in the fort feel disconnected from each other, especially in how it works in the game. The fort wants to be more of a traditional streamlined BioWare game, while the actual gameplay wants to be a co-op focused looter shooter. I like the gameplay and how Anthem provides these one-on-one conversations for the player, but I do think that there could have been a better way to fully integrate the two to be able to have your characters and your party be able to work together at all points in the game. At the same time, I enjoyed these one-on-one conversations and I have no idea how to be able to make these two sections work better together. To clarify, I do not necessarily find this bad, but just something that's disconnected. If you search for Anthem online, it doesn't take you long until you hear about the frequent load times within the game. The load times do crop up and it feels like you're going to experience one even during any minor part in the game. I do agree that the frequent loading is annoying and I think these loading screens could have been done better. The easy suggestion is have less loading screens so we do not encounter them as often, but I do not know how the inner workings of the engine that BioWare is using and how they could improve the load times. But I do have a few suggestions on how to present the load times in a better way. The problem with Anthem's load screens isn't just the loading itself, but rather how bland the load screens are. They are just a still image with not much going on. I do think the load screens would have been a great opportunity to allow the player to read up on the expansive lore for Anthem. This way our attention could be focused on gaining knowledge rather than the annoying loading. What could have been done to improve the load screens is if they animated them. Destiny 1 had a lot of load screens, but they were all animated with the ships flying in space, and you got to experience the game's great musical score. If BioWare didn't have a way to get around all the loading, they should have made these loading screens much more interesting. In some instances, you will see a brief cutscene of your suit, or you getting into your suit before the game switches to a load screen. The suiting up cutscene should have been the actual load screen. For starting missions or free play, it would have been awesome to see your character suit up with Anthem's excellent music score in the background. This would have made the loading screens much more interesting and add motivation for the upcoming mission. For the mid-mission loading screens, the load screens should have been animated and they should have been shots of your suit with different camera angles. You could see the moving parts of your suit and see some of the great detail. While this might not be a solution to decrease the amount of loading, it would have made the loading that is present a lot more interesting. And here's an example of what I mean. This could have turned the loading into a means to channel the motivation and anticipation for battle, essentially getting you pumped up for a mission. I think any of these elements would have improved what we got in the game. There's a point in the story where you'll need to complete a set of challenges to open up 4 tombs to progress the story. The game was patched to improve this area, and while I didn't really have too much issue on completing the challenges themselves, I felt like actually opening the tombs could have been more exciting. I think it would have been better to complete a boss fight or experience a cutscene as a reward. You get a few items for your trouble, but I feel like something better should have been done here. With the challenges, it felt like you were earning rites of passage, and I think there should have been something that was rewarded to the player on a substantial level. There are a bunch of smaller glitches and annoyances that add up over time. My subtitles glitched out my first time going into a mission, especially when I turned them on, and essentially the first line that was spoken just stayed up on the screen. This was cleared after I completed a mission, but it happened early on where I was trying to get familiar with the world, so it was really frustrating. I had another glitch where I couldn't access the forge nor revive any party members in another mission. Both of these were corrected when I was able to get out of the mission and go into a new one. My sound would cut out in me for a few side missions along with the music not playing at all. While not glitches, my next comments are just points in the game where I'm left scratching my head as to why these weren't worked out before the game was released. So I was in free play with my friends having a good time. We were playing for a while and the game said that we hit our inventory limit and couldn't carry any more items and had to exit this session to be able to do anything with our inventory. There's a lot to love about this game, but this just seems badly designed. Anthem should allow you to manage your inventory while in free play or whenever, just like how it's done in Destiny or The Division. You never run into a situation like this in those other 2 games, and it can be really demotivating when a masterwork item pops up and the game says that you can't pick it up and you need to exit out to be able to manage your inventory. I should be able to delete some of my items on the fly and then continue with earning more loot. The game shouldn't punish the player for grabbing a lot of loot within a loot-driven game. This is something that needs help and updated with patches to be able to work this out. If in the future the developers do not want to allow you to manage your inventory on the fly, then I would recommend letting us use the few striders on the map as points to be able to manage our inventory without exiting the session. The servers need help, especially during free play, as I was dropped a good handful of times while doing world events. There's a bunch of collectibles to grab within the open world during free play, but sadly all of this lore is presented in text form. I think this would have been better if this was done as an audio log or narrated in the game's codex like in the first Mass Effect. I am not normally a guy who's in favor of reading long strings of text within my game, unless it really fits the place and purpose of the game like a more traditional Resident Evil. But with Anthem, it's action all the time, so it doesn't feel appropriate to just sit and read something. Another area I would like to see as an option is to be able to switch to a third-person view within the fort. In previous BioWare games, when you are talking to any of the characters, the camera would show the character you're talking to, and then cut back to the other character throughout the conversation. This isn't the most dynamic in terms of camera work, but it helps to really have a flow to the conversation. And it does allow for some more cinematic stuff with the camera. First-person storytelling can work well, like in the Metro games. But like a friend of mine said, this is BioWare's first experience with using it, and it shows. Since you are forced into a first-person perspective while in the fort, the camera never moves since you are that character. So while the conversations are really interesting, how they are presented is very static and boring. I feel like this first-person view would have worked well for, say, something like Destiny, with it being a first-person shooter. But the main gameplay with Anthem is a third-person game. A third-person camera with different camera angles for conversations would definitely improve the flow of the conversations. There are plenty of other issues, and many with the loot and how the loot is delivered to the player. But if I keep going, I'll be here all day. So I want to focus on the content for my last flaw. With there being other looter shooters on the market, and many of them usually launching with a lack of endgame content, after you've hit that max level and completed the stories and side missions. Usually after continual content updates, this is improved and further proves the point that these games should not be bought at launch and bought a year later. I love the first Division, and I joined about a year after it came out, and I found it to have some really good post-game content for me to enjoy. I find Anthem follows suit with many of the prior looter shooters and having a good amount of fun story stuff to beat, but lacking in the variety for post-game content. After you beat the story, you can do co-op strongholds. These are 4-player missions that have some cooperation to them. These are generally fun and remind me of the strikes from Destiny. The problem is, you only have 3 of them to do. This number is way too low and does not provide enough to really shake up the strongholds, especially if you're continually playing them. Anthem needed about 8 to 10 strongholds at launch. This would allow for more variety and a better way to be able to not have this section feel repetitive. Another odd thing that's missing from the endgame is the ability to select a specific story mission and play it again. You can enter quick play to be able to play a random story mission with people, but I find it odd since BioWare does state that Anthem's story is important to them, so why not allow me to replay story missions again? Plus the story is enjoyable and I want to play them again. This seems like an easy thing for BioWare to patch in. Just add a list of the missions that we've already played through and let us be able to select which ones we want to do. Another launch mode that seems like it would have been a safe bet would have been to have a horde mode of some type that provides you with loot and chests. You could survive different waves with changing objectives and bosses, and then at the end of them, you'd have all these loot chests to open up. For me, this is an area I sadly wish that BioWare nailed out of the gate, and now I hope that they can quickly patch in content because I want to play Anthem more, but sometimes I feel like Anthem doesn't want me to play it every day. Anthem is not an easy game to recommend. The games industry likes to throw out the term live service, where a game launches and then is continually updated with more content. This ideally keeps the players playing and spending a lot of time within the game and potentially paying money for the microtransactions. From a concept, I'm fine with this model because in the best execution, I get a full game up front and then get continual updates. But that isn't really the case, especially with EA published games. They have been releasing games without content that you would typically see within normal releases, and then they're providing that content for free later on, when really 6 months down the line we're really getting that full game, but we paid full price up front. And even if I enjoy their games, I do not like this model. If they charge for a full price AAA game, then they should release a full game. If content is missing and will be released later on for free, then I feel like they should release that game at a discount or delay it, because in many cases I would rather wait for the game to go on sale so that it has that additional content. This is really felt within Anthem's endgame. Anthem was supposedly in development for 6 years, but I don't know what was involved during that time. Were they working on the current build, or was there some type of mismanagement going on? I'd like to know the answers to really bring context to this project. One objective of this review was to spend some time praising the movement, controls, and the gameplay. The core gameplay is fantastic and they did some outstanding work here with it. Going to other games after playing Anthem makes you long for the movement presented in Anthem. But Anthem has many flaws and issues that need to get worked out. I understand that there's plenty of things that go on behind the scenes, and this can cause for a less than stellar launch, as I very much wanted them to knock this out of the park. But now I hope that they better it and improve on their launch model. Even though I'm really enjoying the gameplay and will continue to play the game just to see how it grows, I understand that Anthem may not be for everyone, especially for how it currently is. If you're interested in Anthem as it stands, I would recommend that you try this out on a sale. For everyone else, I would say wait and see what BioWare does to improve their game. Because if BioWare makes the right moves, I would happily recommend buying their game. As of right now, Anthem is fun, flawed, and full of potential.